Hey, Mike with Nerd Problems Gaming here, and today's video will be doing a review and how to play video on the Dice Conquest board game, so let's get into it. Alright, now that we got the game out, let's jump through how you play the game so you understand how it works, and then I'll jump into my review after that. Now, Dice Conquest is a cooperative dice game where players will try and take out the evil dragon, Culter Storm, as well as defeating many monsters in a simplified dungeon crawling experience. And so to set up the game, it's very simple. Players will just simply start by choosing a hero of their choice. And so again, each hero has a unique kind of passive ability or ability that they can activate during their turn listed on the cards. There's also a critical hit ability, and how this works is if you roll a die and it has that number, you're able to activate that critical hit ability as well. So choose the heroes that you want to play as for each character, and then set your life total according to the number of players as well. So let's say, for example, I choose the Knight and the Thief, and we're playing a 2-player game. Each player will set their character off to the side. Each player will also get a health tracker chart. Now, it's a little bit hard to see, but you can see on the health tracker here, it indicates where your health starts depending on the number of players in the game. So if you're playing a 1-player game, you'd have 20 health, 2-player would be 10, 3 is 6, and 4-player game, you start with 4 health each. And this is your maximum health. You can't go above that for the number of players that are in the game. So again, we set these off to the side next to the heroes. We're in a 2-player game, so each player starts with 10 health. Determine which player gets started with the first player token. We'll do the Knight in this case. You'll want to place the evil dragon at the bottom of the deck, and then you'll take all the remaining monsters, shuffle these up, and this will form your draw deck for creature cards throughout the game. Now, if you want to make the game a little bit more difficult, you can add these trap cards into the mix, and these are extra negative effects that will happen to your heroes. So depending on how hard you want the game to be, you can add 2, 3, or 4 of these into the base creature card deck as well. We'll just set these off to the side for now though. So once the creature cards are shuffled, placing again the dragon at the very bottom of the deck, you're going to flip up 3 creature cards to start the game. Now, one thing to note is that some cards will have this reveal ability, and so this means as soon as a card comes up, you need to follow that instruction. So in this case, we have to draw an additional card, so we'll place out another additional monster card. Again, you'll want to pay attention to what these monster cards say, so in this case, you can't use a magic item until this creature is slain. Another thing to note, it says this creature must be slain by exactly 3 damage, meaning you can do only 3 damage to them. You can't do more, you can't do less, you have to do 3 in order to kill them. You could, however, have a couple of dice that add up to exactly 3. You just can't go over. Some monsters will cause you to take damage when you place a die on them, so pay attention to that as well. Some also have magic items associated with the monster. You'll be able to acquire these after you defeat them. On the left side here, you see the monster's total health, and if the monster is to survive at the end of the round, they'll do that much damage on the top right here. So again, moving into the actions of the turn, the first player will roll all of the dice on the board, and this will create your starting dice pool to deal damage to the creatures. So again, as you roll the die, you'll look at the face of the die to see how much damage you could potentially do. In this case, we have a 12 here. This die, for example, is a 10-sided die, but one thing to note is that this would be a 1 damage because it's in the 10 spot. But again, there's also a 0, which would indicate 10 damage. It's a little bit different, but that's how you determine how much damage this die does. We have another 10-sided die here, and so again, a 0 would be 10 damage in this case, and then the 1 would simply be 1. Now, when it comes to the die, you can use the face value that came up, or you can re-roll that die 1 time, but if you decide to do that, you're stuck with it. And so again, you'll choose which die you want to use on a monster first, and then you can re-roll, and again, whatever you did, you're stuck with it. And so players will alternate back and forth placing a die on a monster, trying to defeat them by reaching their hit point total on the top left. So let's say we had one do a 12 damage here, and then we've got a 6, and then we do a 2. And now we're at 20 damage, so we actually defeated this monster. So we'll place the die in the used pile. We can discard this monster, and the remaining monsters will move over. And so again, your turn will actually end once you've decided to spend all of the die hurting monsters. Some die you could actually leave on a monster till next round if you choose. And you can even take die off of a monster if you decide you want to re-roll it for next round for a potential better action. So again, as the turn progresses, we can see we defeated this monster as well as this one, dealing the required damage. So we'll actually be able to take these die, put them in the spent pile. And now, since these monsters actually have items, players can choose who's going to get this item that they can use for a future use. So again, simply just read the card to see what those items do, but again, players can use them on a future turn. Now the next thing that happens is that monsters will deal damage to the heroes for those that were not defeated. And so in this case, it's 2 damage, so I'll start by taking off 1 damage point at a time and simply go back and forth from the first player and to the next player and back again. So in this case, we're just doing 2, so each player would take 1 damage. Now when it comes to wrapping up the turn, after that you redraw 3 more cards from the creature pile, and now these are the next monsters that you need to face throughout the game. You'll also be able to get back all of the die that you used in the spent pile, re-roll them, shifting the first player token. This player is now going to re-roll those die, and if you choose to, you could take a die off of a monster if you left it behind and re-roll that as well. Now again, something I mentioned earlier is that you want to pay attention to this critical hit number, because if you roll a die with that number on it, you can activate the critical hit on your hero's card. So make sure you pay attention to that, because that could help turn the tides of battle for your heroes. And again, you could do this every time that number is used, as long as there isn't a monster preventing that ability. Again, play will go back and forth, switching between who's the first player, alternating placing 1 die on a monster, defeating monsters, using items in your turn. And again, you'll continue to do this until the final monster here is revealed. And you also cannot attack this monster until all the other monsters are defeated. And so the heroes and players will win if they defeat all of the monsters and the final dragon before they're defeated. However, if any one hero is defeated and their HP reaches 0, all heroes will lose the game. Another thing to note is that if you happen to slay a creature throughout your turn, you gain the item immediately to one of your heroes, and those die go to the spent pile. There's some abilities or some cards that maybe let you get spent die back to re-roll. So as soon as a monster is defeated, they count in that spent pile, which you could use then, those magic items, or specific abilities your heroes might have. Magic items can also be used at any time during your turn, as long as you meet the requirements listed on the item as described. But outside of that, that's really how you play Dice Conquest. If you had any specific questions, feel free to drop them in the comments, or definitely check out the rulebook as well. But now that you have the general idea on how the game works, let's jump into the review. Well again, now that you have a better idea on how the game works and how to play, how do I actually feel about it? I was actually pleasantly surprised by this game. It's a cool, compact game. It's cooperative, which is a lot of fun. You can also play solo, which is great. I think it has a very high replay value as well. And it was a really cool, simplified dungeon crawling experience. I like that you get the cool dice in the game as well. And it's actually a fun adventure. And so you have that replay value taken up a degree because you have those base heroes that you can choose from, and depending on who you are, maybe who you're playing with as well, those different combinations of heroes can really add to the challenge of the game, and it can definitely alter your overall strategy as well. On top of that, how the monsters come up every time can be completely different, so again, this can either increase your difficulty or switch up your strategy as you go along. Also, the additional feature of adding those trap cards to the game, making it more difficult, is another cool feature as well. And it's very simple to learn. It's not too hard. You just roll the dice, you see what numbers you get. If you want to re-roll it, you can. Otherwise, you're just placing those on the monster. And it's definitely fun to get to work together with the other players in the co-op mode, as you can strategize on who the best option is to use what dice. Again, maybe they can utilize their critical hit ability or their base character ability. And so again, you'll need to work back and forth together to make sure you defeat all the monsters and reach the end of the game. It also doesn't really take very long to play, so this can be a great game if you're looking for a shorter dungeon crawling experience, something to play in between games, whatever the case might be. And so if you like dungeon crawling but aren't looking for an over-the-top difficult one, I think this is a cool game and worth checking out. My only gripe about the game, what I think would be the numbers on the dice. It's a little bit weird on some of the dice where a 0 is equal to 10. I'm not sure why they didn't just put a 10 on the die. Maybe if you're using these for like Dungeons and Dragons or something outside of this game, maybe that makes more sense, but to me I think it would just be a better choice to have put a 10 on the die instead of a 0 or a double 0. But again, it doesn't really take away from the game that much. It's just a little bit confusing at first when you start playing. But again, once you get the hang of it, which probably only takes 30 seconds to realize that difference, it's a great game and a whole lot of fun with a lot of replay value as well. But let me know in the comments below if you played this game before, or you're going to pick it up now that you know about it. Let me know in the comments below. If you'd like to pick up a copy of this game, we'll also have a link in the description below where you can do so. And if you'd like to help us support the channel, pick out content and more, consider becoming a patron of ours at nerdproblemsgaming.com/Patreon. And if you like videos like this on video games, board games, and everything nerdy, check out one of our other videos here. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell notifications to get the latest updates of new nerd videos we put out. But once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll talk to you more soon.